I got to the point where I went to the grocery store and I have a scooter. So one of those electric scooters that you stand on and you ride, they have them in a lot of cities. So I own one of those. I took this scooter to the grocery store to pick up a few things a while back. And I came home and I didn't even realize that I left my scooter at the store. Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more, all to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Eyes Wide Open. Thank you for joining me here today. I wanted to take this episode, which is going to be a solo episode, just with myself, to share some reflections that I've had over the last couple of months when it comes to content creation and burnout. So this is actually going to be a little break for me after this episode to take a few weeks to recalibrate and get back into the podcasting space with a new season of Eyes Wide Open. So consider this your season finale, and we'll be back probably after Labor Day with a whole bunch of new content, new episodes. And I've already got some great guests lined up, so that's going to be excellent as well. But for today, I wanted to talk about something that I think a lot of us can relate to, specifically those of us who are in maybe the content creation world, or even if you're just feeling the types of stress from work that come to creating content or getting your job done, or even if you're someone who's thinking about it. But I decided, and I wrote a LinkedIn article that you can I'll probably use that as the show description, actually, so you can read it down in the show description. But basically, it kind of prompted me to want to talk about this. And I want to talk about burnout, specifically burnout related to, feeling too busy or taking on too much onto your plate, or feeling some sort of like self-imposed pressure to, in my case, to create content on LinkedIn is what sort of sparked this whole thing. So when I take a look at all of the responsibilities that I have between my podcast, my job, my full-time job, the work I do with the UCAN Foundation, and some of the other things that I just have going on in my everyday life, I really decided earlier this summer when I was feeling burnt out, like really burnt out, I decided that I was going to take a break from posting on LinkedIn and Instagram. And one of the reasons I took a much needed break, really from LinkedIn, more so was because on a weekly basis, I would be writing articles or creating content in my sphere of marketing or in leadership, or sometimes even content for my job. And with my job comes the responsibility to create content for marketing, for social media. So I just felt earlier in the summer, I was getting so burnt out, and I just didn't know what to cut, because I looked at all the things I have going on. Obviously, you can only do so much with your job, right? But I do encourage people to put boundaries around work too. But that can be a challenge for all of us as well. But what I decided was I was going to look at everything that I was doing, everything that I had on my plate, and realize what I could pull off for at least temporarily, so that I could refocus some of my energy onto some of the other things that I was doing, like the podcast, like you can, and all of that, other responsibilities that I have in life. So now that I've been thinking over the last few months about LinkedIn posting and Instagram posting, and sort of this pressure that I put on myself, I really decided that I'm doing a lot of this myself. I'm doing a lot of this to myself. I'm creating a lot of pressure for myself to show up in all of these different channels. I'm putting pressure on myself to record, produce, edit, post a weekly podcast. That's no easy feat. And for those of you who do podcast, you know the amount of work that goes into it, even with a lot of stuff being automated. And if you don't, and you're thinking about it, just keep in mind, and I encourage you to do so if it's something that you want to do, but um, I would encourage all of you to really think it through and understand that there's going to be work associated with it. Now, I love doing this podcast. And when my therapist asks, or when I started this exercise of what can I remove, the podcast was like a non-negotiable because I really enjoy doing it. And I think it's an important um, part of my wellness at this point. And I also think that it's a responsibility that I have to bring important information to my listeners who show up week after week after week. So when I realized that I needed to slow down a little bit and LinkedIn content, which, I would spend maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours per week, either writing content or thinking about and writing content and then posting content. And, that includes some of the podcast clips that I would post on LinkedIn as well. But what really made me decide that something needed to go, and I'm prone to burnout. So I will get burnout or I'll experience burnout pretty quickly, especially if I don't take time for myself. I'm also introverted, which most people who are introverted know you recharge by spending time by yourself. And so I got to the point where I went to the grocery store and I have a scooter. So one of those electric scooters that you stand on and you ride, they have them in a lot of cities. So I own one of those. I took this scooter to the grocery store to pick up a few things a while back. And I came home and I didn't even realize that I left my scooter at the store. I was so in my own head and in my own thoughts and mentally fatigued that I rode my scooter to the grocery store, did my shopping, left, and it was just nothing I thought of again until I went to use the scooter again the next day. So I realized at that point, which a sign for me is when I become forgetful of the obvious because I'm just so foggy in my head. And so this was a very important moment for me to realize I need to step back and I need to remove some stuff. So a few months ago, I decided, okay, at the end of my days, which can be long sometimes, I would relax, and I'm using air quotes for those of you just listening. I would relax by writing my LinkedIn content for the week. And turns out writing about what I do for a living with marketing or writing about what it takes to be a good leader or leadership expectations in business today and all of that stuff, turns out that was still work. Even though I enjoy writing, that was still work. So I decided I was going to take this break. And for a few months, I didn't post at all. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I've made in a long time. And it was this constant pressure to perform. It was this constant, when I say perform, I mean create content, to write, to do videos, whatever that is. And I found myself in this constant cycle of I need to keep doing something, whether that's through work, whether it's through the podcast. I just didn't have any time for myself to decompress and recharge. And I felt like I was in a hamster wheel, just running around and never getting anywhere. And when I'd finish my workday, instead of relaxing, I'd crank out another post or plan my next Instagram video or post. And it just got so exhausting. And it became, content creation just became this thing that was something I felt obligated to do, but I was just really putting immense pressure on myself to deliver this content. And it just started to really impact my wellness, my mental health, the pressure that I would put on myself, the podcast promotion. It was a lot to juggle. And I was just starting to feel the heat, for lack of a better word. And the decision to unplug and recognizing my signs of burnout, I realized that this time was different. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was physically and mentally drained, and something had to go. So when I did an audit and realized what had to go for that given time, it was first and foremost, it was LinkedIn. I just wasn't going to post any more content on LinkedIn. I was going to give myself a break from even posting podcast clips on there, because even that takes time and energy, and I just didn't have it. And I wanted to make sure that the content that I was producing or the content that I was putting out there or what I was saying was actually important and not just me checking a box. So for me, it just seemed the step away from LinkedIn was obvious. Now, when it comes to Instagram, as many of you probably know, I have a community there, a significant following, and the expectation I would say that I put on myself there is like I have a responsibility to share, to create, to notify, inform, whatever that might be, show what I'm doing that day, or post pictures of me and my dog, and I just decided I'm going to do that when I feel like it. I'll post on Instagram if I have something to say or I'm doing something that I want to share. But the reality is like my life is my life, and I don't have anyone to post content for other than myself. And so I felt like in this time when I released myself from the self-imposed obligation to post on LinkedIn multiple times a week, I released myself from the self-imposed stress of showing up on Instagram for myself. Over the course of a few weeks, it was really like hitting the reset button on my brain. And now that I look back, I realize that I actually have several lessons that I'm able to learn from this. And I want to share some of those with you because I think, and I'm seeing this in my networks and my friend groups, my family, my coworkers, like people are really, really stressed. People are very isolated. People are lonely. I feel all of those things too. But when I took this little break, and like I said, I posted here and there, not really on LinkedIn, but I posted here and there on other social platforms because I felt like sometimes it just made sense, or it was easy, or I wanted to. And that's what the difference is. So what I learned is, and this is obvious, you've probably heard me say this 100 times myself. I'm sure you've heard it from other people. But when you're pouring from an empty cup, whether that's in your content, whether that's in your job, whether it's in your relationships with your friends and your family or a partner, that is a absolute recipe for disaster. I wasn't taking care of myself, and that was the foundation for all of these things. Now, I'm not perfect, but I do know that I have a tendency to like know things about myself and then not act on them, and then be surprised, or at least it is what it is my tagline. It is what it is. But I would be surprised or shocked that my relationships were not as strong, or that I wasn't able to show up for events or for friends or for family because I was just completely burnt out, just completely out of my mind. And I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do to fill my cup. So the self-imposed pressure that I put on myself, especially when it comes to LinkedIn and Instagram, it was not really shocking to discover, but almost like a realization that my absence or significantly less posting didn't disrupt LinkedIn, didn't really disrupt Instagram. I still hemorrhage followers every single day, which is fine. I don't really care about the followers. If you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, that's fine. It's your prerogative. But what it was to me, especially on LinkedIn, where I would get comments and DMs saying, I really appreciate you providing such good content. I'd get that on Instagram too, right? Like, thank you. I needed to hear that today. Or I appreciate you taking the time, or I feel seen, all of that stuff, which I think is super important. But the wake up call was that the pressure I was putting on myself to constantly post is self-imposed. And so if I'm going to create content that resonates with people, that helps people, that serves them, serves me, I have to be inspired, because inspiration is key. If you're by stepping away, I was able to kind of rediscover my passion for content creation. And that passion started with a LinkedIn post that I wanted to write, which is the first time in probably a year, if not a little bit longer, the first time that I actually felt inspired instead of obligated to write content for LinkedIn. And that was based on a member of my team at work. saying something that sparked me thinking back to an old manager who told me, I know that your team works for you, not the company. And I remember because as this kind of got re-entered my mind in the last couple of weeks, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, I really do have teams that like to work for me, that maybe the old adage of, people quit their boss or people work for their boss is actually true. And so I started reflecting on, what are the good leadership qualities that I have, so that I could kind of build myself up in my own head and remind myself of the things that I do well. So as I started thinking that through and reflecting on that and journaling about it a little bit, I started to get inspired to write about what I think makes a good leader. And as I started thinking about that, I was like, oh, it's like this break actually did give me a little bit of space to start feeling more inspired to be creative, more inspired to write. And I'm starting to think that um, the reason for that inspiration is because I'm not even starting to think. I already know the reason for that inspiration is because I do have something to say. And that something to say is going to be authentic. And that's why authenticity matters, right? It came organically. And we're in a world where people are online and they're posting highlight reels, and we can all kind of watch it and know you're seeing a highlight reel, but it still causes you to internally reflect, sometimes be upset or triggered or disappointed or whatever that might be. So I think, one of the things that's important to me is that when I do show up online, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, I show up as a real person and not as some brand or some, idea of what people think I should be. I'm actually just going to always be me, even when it's online, because I think it's important to be real and people connect with authenticity. And then I also really started thinking a lot about balance, because I know that one of my toxic traits, we'll say, is that I will assume more and more to do, more and more responsibility to distract myself more or less from having to think or sit in my feelings too much, especially if I'm having a hard time. So balance is the new thing that I'm super focused on, because the reality is that it's essential. And if I were to, for example, release myself of the pressure of content creation and then bring something else to do on my list, I'm just replacing that, what's supposed to be, relaxation time or whatever. I'm actually just filling that with something else. I'm going to end up in the same spot or continue down that road of burnout. So life is always going to be a series of ups and downs. And I'm trying to learn that balance is what's going to keep things consistent for me. So I would encourage all of you to do this same thing and remind yourself it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to recharge. And it's okay to come back out there and then go back inside again and take a break and recharge, and make sure that no matter what you're doing out there, that you are making sure that you are taking care of yourself. And I know it's controversial to say, but you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. I'm guilty. I always try to help other people, especially when I'm struggling. That's kind of a way that I sort of level up to realize that the world doesn't revolve around me and my problems are unique to me, but that everyone else has unique challenges themselves too. So I know that about myself, and I try to break that as well. But I just want to encourage everyone. Again, I am certainly not perfect, but I definitely have learned a lot about burnout. I've learned a lot about letting things go, and I'm learning a lot about letting self-imposed pressures go, so that I can show up authentically, inspired, and as my best self as much of the time as humanly possible. So, if I were to sum it up, remember that a lot of pressure we put on ourselves, especially when it comes to content creation or socializing or helping others in our lives or taking on another project at work, a lot of that pressure is self-imposed, And I think you would probably be shocked or surprised to discover that saying no, or your absences from events, or your absences from um, social media, are probably causing less of an uproar than you might think. So, lastly, I would say don't be afraid to take a step back when you need it. It's okay to not be perfect all the time. It's okay to not be okay. Prioritize your mental health, because if you don't put yourself first, no one is putting you first. Find inspiration, be authentic, embrace yourself, be happy for who you are. You are very special, you are very unique, you are very nuanced. People will appreciate it in your life. That's the reason you have the good friends that you have. That's the reason you have strong relationships you have, because when you show up authentically yourself, you're going to be much happier in the long run. So I will leave you with that, thus ending this season of Eyes Wide Open. I'm always curious to know if you have any burnout that you've experienced, or if you've um, developed new tools and stuff to handle it. I'd love to hear your experiences. Send them over to me. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back in a couple weeks with new episodes, a brand new season of Eyes Wide Open. I look forward to it. I hope you do too. And I really appreciate all of you that are here from the beginning, and all of the new ones that come in every single week. I appreciate you. And then last but not least, we're in the dog days of summer. So I hope that you all are enjoying the next few weeks before we head into fall. And as you can see, if you're watching this, I'm wearing a Bears hat. It's football season. But in the meantime, make sure you take time for yourself, fill your own cup, and enjoy the summer. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.